Today, we'd like to tackle a churn-based question. Imagine that you're interviewing with Netflix, and as you know, Netflix, it's a video streaming company. It's a video platform company where people can watch movies, TV shows over the top via stream, via internet on any device of their choosing. So Netflix has two pricing plans available today for users. One is at $15 a month, and the other one is at $100 a year. Let's say that an executive at the company wants you to analyze the churn behavior of users that submit or subscribe to either plan. What kind of metrics, graphs, or models would you build to help give the executive an overarching view of how the subscriptions are performing? Hi, everyone. My name is Chinmay. I'm here with Sai, and we're going to tackle a data science slash data analyst interview, a type of question that you could expect to see at most big tech or tech companies in this domain. Thanks for jumping on, Sai. Let's get started.
So before I start, I would like to ask some questions so that I can go ahead with the plan for this. I assume we define churn as someone who bought a plan last month and then dropped off eventually. And is there a specific time frame that we're looking at, or I can assume it's just month on month?
I think I'd like you to define the different timeframes. What do you think churn constitutes? And then we'll sort through it together.
So for me, I would define churn as someone who bought a plan. And then we have two kinds of plans right now in the current scenario, which is monthly and yearly. Someone buying the monthly plan, for them, the churn can be defined as, let's say they bought the plan in January, they decided not to buy and then Feb, but they came back. So that's churn if you look at on a month-on-month basis. But for someone on a yearly plan, the horizon would be across a year because, again, that's the duration of the plan. So it's not an apples to apples comparison when we're doing finding the difference between the two churn values because once the horizon's different. But I will want to look at the number, let's say over a year, even for the monthly plan. I would define it as someone who bought it in January and then decided not to buy again sometime in December when we're doing the comparison between both. But on a final level, I would also want to look at the numbers for monthly as well.
Okay, so to clarify, you're saying that churn is any user that signs up for a Netflix plan and cancels at any time after that subscription?
So anytime after their subscription expires. So I would define that as someone who does not renew their plan. So basically, if their subscription expires on Feb 28th and then they don't buy it for, let's say, 10 days into the next billing period, I would define that as churn.
I see. So let's clarify this. Right now, all users that subscribe to Netflix are auto-renewing. If a user signs up today, unless they choose to cancel themselves, they will be subscribed or they will be automatically rolled into the following month.
Okay. So then the definition of churn would have to be someone who decides to cancel their subscription because there is auto renewal. Someone decides to cancel pre-hand for next month, or maybe when the next billing period starts, they cancel before it renews automatically.
Okay, makes sense.
And then, so when the executive wants me to analyze the churn behavior, what would be the long-term vision of Netflix? Is it just to grow subscribers, the number of subscribers, or we're looking at revenue, or is there something else that we're looking at as a long-term goal?
Let's have a conversation about that. What do you think the right goal is?
So on a shorter time frame, optimizing for acquiring new users might sound interesting, where we may end up spending a lot of money to acquire those users, and then we may lose them, which can be to various reasons. Competitors coming up, users not liking our platform, lack of content, and others. So for me, I would say retention in the sense, or like looking for constant growth and not something short term. So I would say revenue in the sense that assuming that we have a fixed price that is not very variable, because again, we've seen that Netflix has been raising their prices probably every 2 to 3 years. So revenue should be the long-term vision that I see them going through, which can be through other services that they offer as well, like Netflix is offering games as well to keep users engaged on their platform now. Okay, so I think you made a couple of assumptions there. So let me highlight those. So I think you mentioned you are taking this company like Netflix. You're assuming that this is a mature stage company. So they have enough users to the point where acquiring new users is fine, but losing existing users is a bigger concern than acquiring new users, right? Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is I think pricing plans today are fixed, meaning $15 a month or $100 a year, according to this example that we're using. We're not using real Netflix. but whoever we've acquired, we want them to stay in the platform. So this idea of retention is perfectly right. But I think what I do want to clarify is, are we trying to drive engagement with existing users to help them and make them stay? Or are we, because there's no real revenue, additional revenue to be gained from existing users, right? Or is it
Mhm.
that we're trying to avoid losing revenue as a result of people not engaging with the content? Which one would you focus on?
For me personally, I would focus on avoiding losing users because my hypothesis behind this is that with all these platforms, there is a network effect. So, and then people also, there's cross-refer and everything. And with Netflix, I'm assuming this is a real world scenario where Netflix is cracking down on users sharing passwords with others. So, um,
Sure.
for me, it would make sense to not lose users because that is where we don't have to spend money to acquire them and they just stay on the platform. Whereas when we're acquiring new users, there is something that we basically have to spend money to get them over to the platform.
Are you then also making an assumption that there are new competitors coming into the market and there are lots of other competitors in this domain that people could switch to, and we don't want to have them leave our platform?
Yeah. So my assumption here is this is a highly competitive market.
Okay.
Not specifically saying that there might be new ones coming in, which may happen in the future, but there is a lot of competitors in the space that may offer similar or lesser experience, but at a lower price. So that's where we might be losing some of our users.
Okay. So you want to focus on retention and you want
Yeah.
to minimize churn and you want to make sure that whoever you've paid to acquire stays.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move forward.
Just give me some like a minute to gather my thoughts and I'll come up with a plan.
Yep.
All right. So some of the top line metrics that I would like to track in order to see if we're growing and compared to pricing models would be um, just the average lifetime of a user on the $15 plan versus a $100 plan, number of
Mm-hmm.
users migrating from the monthly to the yearly plan, which could basically indicate that users are liking our platform and they're indicating their interest in being on the platform for longer term. And then the counter to that would be the number of users who switched from a yearly plan to a monthly plan. We could track that. And then for engagement, I would like to, based on the cohort, so I would also like to see if we're looking at the churn numbers. The cohort would be someone who has been on the platform for 3 months, 6 months, and a year, and then looking at their engagement numbers like average watch time, number of new series or movies opened or just watched. And I would define watched here as probably 5 minutes of watch time, just to see if they're looking for new content and maybe able to find that. And then we could also do this for the cohort when we know that the user who has churned, we can look at these numbers right in the month before they dropped off. And then lastly, something that we can also track is the number of users who turned off the auto renewal, so that these are the kind of users who would want to buy like news like subscription if they want to watch new content and they don't want the plan to auto renew. So we may have a look if these users who might be frugal or kind of think about their subscriptions every month, we want to track them and see if they're actually actively engaging and maybe keep us look at them.
I see. So, okay, I think you covered a lot of different graphs. What questions are you attempting to answer for executives with these
Yeah.
graphs?
So for me, there are two things that I want to track. Is basically
Mhm.
first one would be the performance of the $15 plan versus the $100 plan, and this is because per revenue $15 plans generates more for us because that's more money over a year. But $100 plan indicates that a user is willing to spend a bigger amount of money at one time and staying on the platform, which could mean that we can monetize it further. So when I'm looking at that performance, I want to look at the number of users, like I said, migrating from the monthly to the yearly plan and yearly to the monthly plan. This is just to compare if how strong they're feeling affiliated to the program of subscribing to Netflix. And then average watch time is the engagement number that I want to track to see if that has any correlation to basically, or like engagement on the platform has any correlation to users churning or not.
I guess what I'm curious about is the conversion makes sense, but as a result of someone going from monthly to annual, we as a company lose $80 per year on that customer, right?
Yeah.
Um, do you think that that's the right like that's the right approach to take, is to try and convert as many people as we can from monthly to annual?
So this is an interesting question, and I believe on a monthly basis it doesn't. So for this, I would like to look at some numbers and see if how many the percentage of users, or like on the users who are using the monthly plan on a yearly basis, how many months are they subscribed on? The assumption that we're making here is that someone who's using the monthly plan is subscribing every month, and that's what brings us the $80 extra in revenue. But let's say there is someone who's just subscribing for 4 months. That's a $60 revenue versus a $100 revenue that we might get from someone who is on a yearly plan. One hypothesis test that I would like to run is that I'm assuming the users who are generally subscribing to these monthly plans are the ones who are more of those people who want to binge watch series, or like they have some kind of favorite series or shows that they subscribe to Netflix for a month or two in a year. They watch it and then they do not renew their subscription.
Okay.
So
So the executive comes back and says, hey, I like where you're going with this, but I want you to run a cohort analysis. It's something that I've heard about that's being used in the industry. How would you address this executive's question? And that's number one. Number two is, what cohorts would you now design to answer this question that he has about, hey, how do cohorts apply in relation to churn?
Mhm. Like I had mentioned earlier, there are two cohorts that I would really be interested in. And by cohort, what we mean is that someone who basically, we can define cohort here as someone who joined Netflix at the time of joining, like when they subscribe. So it could be someone who has spent 3 months on the platform. That would be one cohort. But the cohort that I would be interested in is that one would definitely be the number of users who have churned in the current month. And then I would look at these numbers for the month back prior. So I have their, let's say, I have their user IDs or something with which I can track the users who have churned this month, and I would like to track the metrics the previous month, because I would want to see that are they actively engaging, or maybe I want that's where I can figure out why these users are churning. So that is one cohort that I would be interested in. So that's the churning users.
So, okay, cohorts are groups of users, right? That's really what you're
Mhm.
telling me. And there are certain groups of users that have certain patterns or attributes about them. So time since first join makes sense as dimension. Are there any other dimensions that you can think of that makes sense for us to look at our set of users via cohort wise?
Yeah. So I'm assuming I have access to all these users' demographics as well. So that could be an interesting dimension to look at. Why do I say so? Let's say we have the churning users. Maybe there is some region. Since Netflix is a global company, maybe it's India or maybe it's Southeast Asia, where we're looking at these users who are churning on a rapid rate, or maybe we're not catering enough to in between an age range of 25 to 35. That's where users are dropping off suddenly, or they're not subscribing more. So demographics would be certainly another interesting dimension that I may want to look at, but this is again based on the analysis that I have from the data set that I have on the churning users.
Okay, this makes sense when are you looking at users that have already churned and left, or are you looking at users that are about to churn? Like, what would the graphs and charts tell you if you were looking at users from a perspective of when they first joined?
So from the initial joining period, if I'm looking at that cohort, the charts would help me analyze their behavior on Netflix. So it could be the average watch time, the number of series they have watched, how long they're spending on platform, or I can also do a survival analysis on that. So just to predict how long they will take to churn based on some features. And this then can be used the other way around as well. So like you had asked, am I using this cohort to predict if users will churn or not, or am I using it on churning users? So if I use it on the users who have already churned, I can figure out some based on a lot of features that I have, why they were churning. And this can be done using an statistical test. And then based on that, I can also create a predictive model that can help me predict if a user will churn or not based on those features.
I see. Okay, so now the executive says, okay, this makes sense. You want to look at engagement and really look at it from the perspective of when that user first joined. But then the executive says, are there any proactive steps or actions that we could take today to determine if someone is about to churn, we can interrupt their decision making and have them stay.
So proactive steps.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
once we've lost a customer, we've lost them. The
Yeah.
best time to catch them is before they leave. Help me come up with a recommendation that I can take to the board to say these are the steps that we're taking to prevent churn, using your charts and graphs that you described so far.
Mhm. So the charts and graphs that we have right now is that, let's say we have a dashboard that suggests that, okay, this user may churn because his engagement rate is down based on that cohort that we saw. And then this lines up perfectly with the users who dropped off earlier. So the ways to maybe stop those customers from dropping off from the platform would be showing them, okay, this is the number of shows or movies that are lined up for the coming month. That is basically showing them something that they've already seen, or maybe let's say they watch a series and its new season is coming up in the coming next 2 months. Maybe we just show them that. And then I know notifications and emails might not be the right way to do that, or maybe sometimes that may push the user even more to unsubscribe just because we're bombarding them with notifications or emails. But just an email saying that, hey, you've been something like a social feature. Hey, you've been on Netflix for this long and you watch all this and your friends are watching this. Maybe you want to stay for longer. And this is something that we can always A/B test on. But these are the two things that come to top of my mind to stop someone from churning out. Like basically, content is the only way we can stop them from going out. And then that's it.
I see. Okay. Okay, sounds good. So your recommendation is to present or to really showcase content to users that are about to unsubscribe
Yeah.
as a means to retain them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I'll take it to the board and we'll see what happens. All right. Okay, so maybe let's spend a couple minutes just reviewing how the case went. And I think our audience could benefit from just learning about how to approach some questions like this in a different way. So let's just start off with, how do you think it went? How do you think the interview went? If this was a real interview, do you think you did well? If you had to rate yourself, what kind of rating would you give yourself and why?
I would say a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. I feel that I was structured in my response, and then I asked some clarifying questions in the beginning. Maybe churn, the way I defined churn could have been different, or maybe I should have slowed it down there a bit. And then I think I was able to come up with metrics and graphs to track the problem correctly and tackle the problem. Somewhere that I feel that I could have done better is the last question that we had, that what can be some proactive ways to stop users from churning. And probably there is where I blanked out a bit, and that is a section I feel I could have done better.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think there's some things that you did well. I think you were obviously well versed with like kind of putting the charts and graphs that you had in mind. You came out with them very quickly. I think you did attempt to try to clarify what churn meant and what it meant to the company and where the I think we did spend a fair bit of time just trying to understand where the company's position was. And so I think you did identify the right issue of, we should try to keep the users that we have. So our main business objective is retention. Because obviously, if this question is being asked, there must be some kind of churn happening, or there must be some drop in revenue that's occurring, and that filling the top of the funnel isn't the right answer, but it's making sure that the funnel that we do have stays full. I think what actually would have helped though is when we started to go down into, before we actually went into the charts and graphs, I think if you had spent a little bit more time identifying what areas churn could be happening in and identifying attributes that lead to churn, that would have helped you down the line. So I think I had to so in a typical interview, you wouldn't really get the kind of hints that I was trying to drop, which is I was trying to take you from just charts and graphs into cohorts, right? And I was trying to get you to think about, how would I segment my user base today? And which segment of users should I be focusing on and why? And what segment am I making this decision? Like, what are the attributes about this segment that I'm looking at specifically? So the kind of answer that I was looking for is, I would look at the cohort of users that were first on a monthly plan. Then I would look at users on an annual plan. And I think you were on the right track of, how do you convert monthly to annual? But converting as many as we can from monthly to annual wasn't the right answer either, because you're losing half of your annual revenue, which is not more than half. You're losing 80% of your annual revenue by technically converting over someone from monthly to annual. But what you could have also done is a break even, where it's like, even if someone stays for, I think, 6 or 7 months, that would equal the annual revenue that you would get whether they stayed subscribed for that full year. So that might have, changed the calculus, where it's like, even if a monthly user stays for 6 or 7 months, or maybe potentially 8, sorry, my math isn't working right now as I'm talking, but that break-even analysis would have actually helped a lot, because technically it's best to convert somebody maybe 6 or 7 months after the fact that they've stayed subscribed, as opposed to trying to. It's not just enough to like have them join and then convert them right away to an annual plan. If you know that there's potentially a 6 or 7 month runway that they could say subscribe for on a monthly plan. You see where I'm going with this? The additional revenue would offset the retention cost or the churn cost that we might expect. So that break even might have helped. Then from there, I would have liked to, once you did that break even, then I would have liked to have seen you go into behaviors or actions or inactions that users are taking right before they churn. Like, what is happening and what is the timeline or time frame that you would use? So I think you were assuming that a month before was a good enough indicator, but I would actually go down and deeper into 1 week, actually few days. So 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 90 days. These are really usually like, those are the rolling segments that we have. So like R7, R3, R5, R7, R14, R30, and R90. And you can go back all the way. So time since first joined may not just be the right thing to look at, but in fact, it's since they've joined, has anything changed in their behavior for people that have maybe been subscribed for 6 months or more, or maybe 3 months or more, or maybe 1 month or more. So looking at it from different angles. So I think ultimately, it's important to think about all the different dimensions and attributes that you can use to segment your user base, and then determine what is the right angle to, what are the right metrics or basically facts to apply. So usually in BI we have dimensions, and we have dimensions and fact tables. And dimensions are what the cuts would be, and then how you would break a large cohort of users up. And then the facts are on what measures will you evaluate the performance of this cohort. And so your fact, like average watch time, is one fact, but what other facts could you also look at? Maybe it's the amount of time spent looking for a movie or a TV show to watch, or maybe it's actually not just the average number of minutes they watched, but how many movies or TV shows once they started actually they completed. And is there a drop-off rate maybe in the middle? Maybe sometimes what might be happening is users start something and they don't actually finish it because they get disengaged from it. So even though their average number of minutes could be potentially high because they keep starting and stopping things every day, the story could be completely opposite, which is we're actually not enjoying any of the content that's being presented, even though there is new content. So just seeing data analysis questions through the lens of like a Rubik's Cube, where you can, there's infinite ways to kind of rotate the cube in different ways. But ultimately, if you found the answer to your question, what decision could someone take from it? That's what you always want to drive towards. And the decision point was really, if you think someone is about to churn, what do you do? And so I think your final recommendation around presenting new content, it's not wrong, but I think there's also other things that can be done, which is, if this is a very price conscious subscriber, maybe the right idea is to offer them a discounted annual plan to stop them from leaving. And then if it's not a price sensitive consumer, maybe it's someone who didn't even know the annual plan was even relevant, or it wasn't even presented to them maybe, then maybe you present that to them instead, and as a way of downgrading or trying to keep them. So ultimately, once a user has made it to the cancellation screen, they've kind of already made up their mind. So it's important to look at how do you also catch them at different points in the funnel. Yeah, but that's kind of like that was kind of my take on it. But otherwise, I think it was a good interview, and from a data analysis perspective, I think you did try to hit the main points.
Just a quick question. So when I saw the question, I felt like I could have gone down, like you said, maybe try to drill down a bit to see what the root cause for user churning could be. And this is where I think maybe I could have gone down, but I felt like this was more of like doing a trade-off between the monthly versus the yearly plan. How do when I get presented with such a question, how do I decide, like, how do I know that should I drill down more or just focus on what has been specifically asked in the question?
Always ask your interviewer. Never hesitate to ask your interviewer. Just ask. If you're thinking, hey, I want to drill down into this whole annual versus monthly plan kind of situation or scenario, then just ask, is this something that you're looking for me to do? Do you want me to kind of continue down this? And you can always preview your thinking to an interviewer so that you can prevent yourself from going down an angle where the interviewer has no interest in. Because that's often what happens. You go down, I know where you're going, where it's like you'll go down a rabbit hole, but you don't even know if it's the right rabbit hole. But instead, you can say, is this an avenue that you actually want me to pursue?
Okay.
Yeah, ask. There's never any harm in asking. The most the interviewer will say is, no, I don't think this is the right way. I want you to take a different turn. Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. All right, thanks, Sai.